Hello, everyone. How are you
Hi,
today? It
how's
appears
it
like
going?
our audio levels are good for a change, so we'll start out a stream with microphones that work. But how is everyone doing today?
Happy to see folks here. I'm not like draining out of my nose today, so that's an improvement from last week.
Yeah, I had to deal with a couple of days of Jess not wanting to post last week's stream because she was upset about it. But yes, Jess lives. She does in fact live, unless this is just a holographic projection that I have programmed. Um, so you can, it'll be like that the
I'm a
the Mary
clone.
Poppins scene in the Last
Yeah.
Jedi, and Princess Leia is just gonna float through you on her way to the door. Um, but but we are here again with another StreamCast this week. One that I guess you could say we're excited about.
I mean,
It,
motivated.
yeah,
I'm
yes,
motivated about this
motivated.
week.
Maybe that's a better word. But it's something that we've been wanting to talk about, I think, for a while, and we have been
Mm-hmm.
talking about for a while
Yes.
between us, and we haven't really sort of figured out the best way to have this conversation. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
kind of just go through it today. But we definitely want to get your input today as well, because this is basically a conversation about our Star Wars fan community.
Yes.
And if you are here, we know that we got some people that are just here because they like us and we're awesome, and that's undeniable. But um, but whether you're here because of Star Wars or for us, you're a part of this community too. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is not just us that we're talking about. This is you that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And
Not just super fans. Like I've long held that all it takes to be a Star Wars fan is to like one thing that is Star Wars. And if there's
well,
one thing that's Star Wars, then you count.
yeah. But we want to talk today about Star Wars fandom, about
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be a Star Wars fan. About are there, we're not fans of gatekeeping here, but we can talk about like what does it mean to be a Star Wars fan? If you casually went and saw The Last Jedi and have never done or seen anything else, but you kind of like that, like, are you a fan? Like, we can talk about that kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
too. But with recent events in the last week, we also kind of want to talk about just the state of fandom,
Yes.
and what fan culture is like online these days. And so this is going to be maybe maybe a less fun conversation today. So make sure you're hitting up all those mini games in the chat,
Yeah, just to keep it
because
light.
somebody's got to do something here to avoid um, anger and tears. But but we want to kind of get real a little bit today, in a way that allows us to have a conversation and not just make a video that kind of bloviates
Right.
to our audience also.
Well, and the events that we're talking about, if you don't follow Star Wars social media, so the kind of catalyst of this is the actress who played Rose in The Last Jedi, Kelly Marie Tran, quit Instagram because she had been harassed so much on her own Instagram. So the section of Star Wars fandom that hated The Last Jedi so much that they just can't handle it
Right.
went to her Instagram specifically and just wrote horrible, horrible things, so much so that she quit Instagram. Um, and this is sad to me because she is not an abrasive person. It's not like she's a person where you say something kind of critical and then she kind of comes back at you and like starts an argument. Like she's a sweetheart. Like if you watch her on any kind of interview, anything, she just
Mm-hmm.
is over the moon excited that she's in Star Wars and wouldn't want to start an argument with anyone.
Right.
So this is kind of got the internet community in an uproar on just how fans or supposed fans are
Right.
talking about Star Wars.
I mean, and the thing that gets me about Kelly Marie Tran too, um, is that to me, she is what she the way she emotes one is just awesome. Like
Right.
it's just a sign that she's just like a good person. But it's like I just feel like that is how most Star Wars fans would be if they were in Star Wars. Like I think any actor or actress, regardless of whether or not they like Star Wars before, would be excited to be in a Star Wars film because for most of them that means it's going to pay pretty well. But
Right.
but like the genuine kind of emotion that she shows, like I remember seeing pictures. I think it was from the Solo premiere, and there was somebody at the Solo premiere that was cosplaying as Rose, that was like on the line or whatever as they were walking through, and she like just started weeping when she saw them because she was so happy, and she went up and gave them a hug, and it's just like this genuine person that is like embracing Star Wars and fandom, yet is the recipient of this type of hatred, and like that's the type of thing that I don't understand. And so we were talking about this ahead of time, and this is one of the things, especially if you have thoughts in the chat, is I'm genuinely interested, especially because we run a Star Wars fan site, and it came out of discussion boards and forums. How do we as fans create a community where we can have genuine conversations that are not just overly critical, but are not just overly happy? We can have real conversations and be critical, but do it in a way that does not encourage this type of negativity. Like that's
Right.
Like how can we have a real conversation that allows for criticism while also not encouraging this particular part, a small part though it may be, of our Star Wars fandom? So do you have thoughts about that? Because I mean, we're moderators and administrators on a site that has to do this ourselves. So how do what do you think about this?
And like for me, because I was talking to Django about this ahead of time, is I'm not a fan of Rose from The Last Jedi. Like I don't hate her character, but I don't have a strong attachment to her character. There were so many other characters from The Force Awakens that I already loved that I wanted to spend more time with. So as much as she was an okay character, I didn't want to spend time with another character. I wanted to spend more time with the characters that were already there. But never in a million years did it occur to me to blame Kelly Marie Tran for her character's existence and to take it out on her personally for, I guess, just not telling Rian Johnson off and quitting the movie. Like, I'm not entirely sure what she was expected to do.
Right.
And so that's just such a strange thing for me. But I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, but the reason why I haven't done anything on it personally is I don't want to validate the portion of fandom that is just this angry and this violent. Like there's on Twitter right now, there's the people that started the boycott Solo campaign because they hated The Last Jedi so much, and now because of how Solo performed in the box office, they think they won. Like they think that they're the reason that Solo quote unquote underperformed, even though they're like 10 people and they didn't do it. And I'm sorry, like if you didn't go see Solo because you didn't like The Last Jedi, that's fine, you're allowed to do it. You are not personally responsible for its box office numbers. So I haven't wanted to do a video on it because I just don't want to give someone the attention. I've been a moderator for a long time, and I know you don't feed trolls because that's how they get bigger. So I haven't wanted to talk about the negative part of fandom because I don't want to make it feel like it's important enough to be talked about and that it's large enough to be talked about.
Right.
But if a couple of guys who probably all had 10 accounts when they were harassing her, because that's how people like that work, making them seem 10 times more, populated than they are, chase an actress who honestly would be the type of actress that would actually talk to fans.
Right, sure.
Off, because like so many of the actors, even if they're proud of being in Star Wars, don't necessarily engage with the fandom, and she's somebody who would have.
Right.
And that's really sad to me. That feels like a really large lost opportunity for us.
Yeah. I mean, and it just strikes me too because, I don't want to be too political, even though politics is what I do, but I feel like we live in an age where it's not just political correctness, but where like just blatant sexism and racism and sexual assault have been topics in the last couple of years and days.
Yep.
And I think about the difference between the two people who, in my mind, apart from like Pablo, and Leland and people like that are like running Star Wars for me these days, are Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni.
Yep.
Neither of whom are new to Star Wars.
Right.
But I guess it's a coincidence. It happens every year. But today's Dave Filoni's birthday, so Dave, if you're watching, happy birthday.
I'm sure he's our number one viewer.
Well, if you are our number one viewer, know that we are your number one viewers.
Exactly.
But today's Dave Filoni's birthday, and I've seen some of the comments on different posts on social media for Dave Filoni's birthday. But a couple of days ago was Kathleen Kennedy's birthday.
Yep.
And the tone of those posts is so completely different. Like, I just don't know, like, I feel like toxic is a word that gets tossed around a lot, and it's charged, and people take it personally, and that's another thing we can talk about is how people think that criticisms of fandom apply to them specifically. But, like, it is toxic. Like, I don't know how you can say that attacking these people personally because of their jobs or because of the role that they played in a movie that you didn't like so well. Like,
It's a movie. They're not politicians. They're not making policy for your life.
Right. Yeah. At least one birthday. Oh, Fat Batman was born on Leap Day. So.
Oh.
Yeah. So happy birthday eventually.
You're only a couple years old then.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, I guess not, because you're complaining about it. But I've always thought that type of thing is cool. But I don't know. I just don't know how to eternally young. Yeah. I just don't know how to. I mean, because even in some of the tweets that we've gotten on Port Haven, the responses that we get trying to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how we have a conversation, again, that allows for legitimate criticism without trying to say that criticism in general is illegitimate, but that acknowledges, I guess in kind of an Animal Farm kind of way, that not all criticism is equal. Some criticism is more equal than others.
Right, yeah.
Because, like, I think about this too, and we've talked about this, and you can talk about it more if you want to, but, like, I know that you had problems with Rogue One.
Yep.
Like, you had legitimate issues because of your career training and your personal tastes. You had problems with Rogue One. And we can have, real critical, like, what does this mean? I didn't like this because conversations about problems that you had with a movie. Like, we can be movie critics, that's fine. But, like, you didn't go and attack Gareth Edwards personally over it. You didn't.
How dare you?
Go after Felicity Jones because I just don't see how those things get conflated.
Right. Well, like, one of my problems with Rogue One, and I don't mean to turn this into a Rogue One debate, and like obviously anybody who liked Rogue One is totally fine, but like part of Rogue One, and I can understand where this comes from. It's an ensemble movie. It went through a couple different drafts. Like, I think it's just a case of certain things needed to be shaved off that just didn't get shaved off, but so much other stuff did. But I think this is actually a pretty good example. I think Bodhi Rook is a completely useless character in the movie.
Right.
That's the pilot that brings the plans from Galen Erso to Saw Gerrera, and Saw gives them to Felicity Jones. He's useless. He serves no function to the story whatsoever.
Right.
Cassian and K2SO can already pilot, and in fact pilot most of the movie.
Right.
And you could easily have had a pilot be a courier that we never met, and it would have had the exact same impact. Knowing Bodhi didn't add anything. What I didn't do was hate Bodhi because the actor's of Arab descent.
Right.
Right. Like, my problem with the character is not the ethnicity of the actor. Like, I have zero problem with Rizzy, this doesn't really help my point because I can't remember his name. I'm blanking on it, but he's a super nice dude. Like,
Yeah.
On social media, he's super nice. He follows like a bunch of charities. Like, he seems like a good, solid person, and the type of person I'm glad got a role in Star Wars because he deserves good things in his life. I don't have any problem with him. I just think his character was pointless.
Right.
But oh well. So what?
Yeah.
Like, the movie still exists. The movie still has Chirrut and Orson Krennic, who are two of my favorite characters of all time. It's fine. Like, I can't imagine tweeting at the actor and being like, why did your character suck? Like,
right.
What good would that do?
Or direct messaging him on Instagram.
Right.
Like...
with some sort of like really racist comment, and there's a difference there. And I think what happens, because we were talking about people taking criticism personally, and there's some to do with a Star Wars author named Chuck Wendig, who some people have taken issue with lately, and it becomes a thing where if you didn't like The Last Jedi and you didn't like Rose because you have legitimate reasons to not like Rose as a character, which there are. I didn't care for Rose either. No one's talking about you. Like, the criticism on fandom is not talking about people who just didn't like The Last Jedi. It's not talking about people who didn't like Rose. Right. It's not even talking about people who think Rey is overpowered and learns too quickly. Like, you can even think that. You're not inherently sexist.
Right.
But then there's other things that trickle in. So what happens is you have people who think Rey is overpowered, think Rey learns the Force too fast, think it's weird that Rey can understand Chewie without it being explained. But it's not necessarily because Rey's a chick. They just don't like that. Mm-hmm. But then you have people who don't like Rey because Rey's a chick, and rather than saying that, they say the legitimate critiques about Rey.
Right.
But they do it by personally harassing people on the internet. So then people kind of get lumped together. And I think that's the danger. And that's where a lot of people feel hurt by, things J.J. Abrams has said, things that, like Chuck Wendig, as if Chuck Wendig speaks for Star Wars just because he wrote a couple of books, but whatever.
Right.
I mean, they're important books, don't get me wrong, but the man is a on contract employee of Lucasfilm. He's not like a representative of Lucasfilm. So I don't know why anyone takes what he says as gospel, but whatever. You have people who feel like they're getting attacked, but it's not about you.
Right.
Like, it's okay.
Well, and that's another thing that I don't really understand either, because I was mentioning this to you earlier, but I saw yesterday, Mark Hamill tweeted, it was just a picture of him with Kelly Marie Tran, and it said something along the lines of what's not to love in the caption or something like that. And I did a thing that I knew that I shouldn't do ahead of time, and I'm like, I'm gonna read the responses to this tweet. And I knew before I did that was a mistake, but I did it anyway. But like that Twitter feed was full of three things. One, there were people there who were offering support for Kelly Marie. There were people there that were genuinely like saying all this racist and sexist stuff about her. And then three, there were people who were like, oh, well, I didn't like Rose, but nobody's complaining about her, like, personally, in the midst of people complaining about her personally. and that's that's one of the things I don't understand about stuff like this, is just because you are not the person doesn't mean that person doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean that there aren't more than one person, or that even if there's not that many people, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of people to cause somebody real, like, emotional distress.
Right. Again, especially on the internet, like I said, where one person can make 10 accounts.
Sure.
And make it seem like they're an awful lot louder than they are. And that's, it's hit a point where I feel like people are so defensive, because I've had a couple of different debates, either from my Yoda Bauer Twitter account or through the Port Haven Twitter account, which is sometimes me and sometimes Django, where I've started a discussion. And I've started the discussion with my feet already firmly in the ground. Like, we'll say something and we'll get a response, and I'll be like, oh man, this is one of those people and I just kind of like go at it, and I don't say anything super intense, but I'm already making an assumption on who I'm talking to, that this is a person who didn't like The Last Jedi and they're angry about it, and they're going to make sure that I know why they're angry about it. And then they're talking to me like I'm already somebody who couldn't possibly see any flaw with The Last Jedi, and we've already made assumptions about each other. And after about 2 hours, you know, not constant back and forth, but like checking Twitter and going back, I realized I'm talking to a rational person who thinks I'm not rational.
Right.
And I'm a rational person thinking I'm talking to somebody who isn't rational. And we almost got in an argument for no reason. And by the end of it, we're kind of like, oh, I mean, you're okay.
Right.
Oh, well, you're okay. And like we've had like nice little internet handshakes at the end of the conversation.
Right.
And I think the percentage of the people who are really, really that angry is so small. But like you said, it just takes a small number of people to cause this distress. So this small sliver has us all making assumptions about each other.
Right.
Where just because you don't like The Last Jedi and you want to tell me why you don't like it, it doesn't mean you're going to be throwing something in my face. But I have to check myself because I start to automatically assume that about a person.
Right.
When I shouldn't. I absolutely shouldn't. And if I'm making that assumption, I'm wrong.
Right.
I shouldn't think someone's guilty before I check if they are.
Well, and I think
we don't do it.
I think part of this too, and this is a thing that goes beyond Star Wars fandom or fandom in general, but there are people, I mean, and you and I both know some of these people who, you know, if they feel like if you disagree with them, then you somehow think they are a bad person.
Right.
And so, like, they get defensive when you disagree, even about something small, because they feel like somehow you're assuming things about them personally. And sometimes people do that. And I think I think it has become so common for people to do that, that the assumption is that people are doing that either way. And so you get to that point where, you know, I feel like I either I can't say I didn't like this thing because I feel like I'm going to get hatred, and so I don't, and I feel like there are people who feel like in Star Wars fandom they don't have room to express their discontent because people attack them for it. I feel like there are people in Star Wars fandom that feel like they don't have room to express that they like the thing because people are going to attack them for it. You know, I know definitely that's how I felt about Solo in the last 3 weeks, if I'm going to be honest about it. And I went and saw Solo, and I feel like I even mentioned this on the StreamCast last week. The whole time I was watching Solo in the theater, I was distracted, knowing that I was going to have to defend this movie because I was enjoying it. And and again, if you didn't like Solo, you know, I did. So I disagree with you, but as much as I can disagree about something that is ultimately a matter of personal taste. But like, I don't think you are wrong. I mean, any more than necessarily I think that I'm right. But like, I knew, and the tone of our discussions on Twitter has been so different in the last 3 weeks, and I don't understand how to have those conversations. How to have those conversations about Star Wars, about anything anymore. And it's gotten to the point a couple of times where I just feel like I'm just going to watch Star Wars alone in my house by myself, and I'm going to enjoy it, and the rest of you can just have the internet to yourself because I'm kind of done with that, you know?
Yeah, I completely understand. There were a couple. I don't think I was as plagued by it in Solo as for some, but there's definitely that sense of like, oh crap, are people gonna like? I think I actually felt that more during The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
During The Last Jedi, I knew going in The Last Jedi was going to be the type of movie that people were going to love or hate, and I kind of had that oh crap moment, like as the lights dimmed in the theater of what if I hate this movie. And that's part of where I think I left it so conflicted, is I left The Last Jedi thinking to myself, am I supposed to like this or am I supposed to hate this? And it took kind of talking about it in that second viewing for me to like just kind of like let go and enjoy the movie. But unfortunately, I think it's kind of hit that point. And I kind of wonder how insulated this is. Like, am I more aware of this now in the last couple of months, in the last year, because it's worse in the last year, or am I more aware of it now because just in the last year have I been getting involved with Star Wars social media? Because I this is like a year ago was when I was starting to, and I'm a little bit unsure because I don't have that like long-term perspective.
Right. Well, I don't want to be, again, I don't want to be like political or socio-economic, analyst about things, but I feel like the world has changed a lot, especially on Twitter in the last year or two because of political things. And I feel like that has started to bleed over because, I've been on Twitter and I've been talking, interacting with Star Wars stuff for a while. And I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not trying to assert this is fact. But from my point of view, it is different. Maybe not in tone, because, I think, a certain type of complaint has always been around. But just in the amount that has dominated the conversation, I feel like that has changed to a certain extent. And I think Nolan asked an interesting question in the chat. He says, is there like a main group? Is this mostly just the people that are religious about old Star Wars canon? And because I feel like I definitely have thoughts about this too. And because I know, so I don't know if Rebecca's still in the chat, but Rebecca is somebody, is a friend of ours from Port Haven Sticks, who is a big fan of the old Legends canon, which we both are too, to be frank about that. And I don't know that is the case, that people who are really into the Legends canon are less likely to like new stuff. But I feel like, and I've talked about this with you before, Jess. I don't know what I've mentioned on the stream, but I feel like a lot of us kind of grew up with the prequels in a way. My first seeing Star Wars was the special edition in theaters in '97. Like, I'd never seen Star Wars before. I wasn't alive in the '70s and in the early '80s. I didn't have that type of experience. And I feel like the way it went for me is I saw the movies, the prequels in theaters as I was growing up, and I loved them. And then at some point I realized that was not the thing I was supposed to do anymore because everybody hated the prequels. And I feel like since then, so since like 2004, 2005, Star Wars fans have been so guarded about Star Wars that they're afraid to enjoy it. They're afraid because
what if it's bad?
Yeah, and the
and then they're wrong.
And the cool thing to do in Star Wars is to not like Star Wars. And, and there've been memes going around that was like, people said that The Force Awakens was too safe, and then Rogue One was too familiar, and then The Last Jedi was too risky, and now Solo is, it's like, what do you want from Star Wars media? Like if you're upset that Mara Jade's not in the book anymore, that's one thing. But if you have a mindset about Star Wars that is going to keep you from enjoying anything, I don't know how to address that either.
Right. Yeah, it's one thing if you liked the old stuff and the old stuff is what you like, and you're just going to kind of be happily over there with Legends, and you just aren't as interested. Like, there's a difference between just not being interested in the new canon and being mad about it.
Right.
And it was one thing to be mad about it when it happened, but to like be still so mad about it that you have to actively hate on the new stuff.
Right.
is just different. Like, I don't understand it, but I don't have any problem with somebody who doesn't want to at least try the new stuff. Because they're just happy with how it used to be. Right. I don't have any problem with it. I can get it. But at the same time, it's just different than wanting to boycott Solo. Right. There's a difference. There's a canyon in between disinterest and I'm going to actually waste time out of my life to tell someone that I'm going to not go see the Solo movie.
Well, and there's a difference too, even between that and saying, on the one hand, I'm not interested because I'm good with what has existed before, and or I read it and I don't like it as much, and so I'm going to stop. There's a difference between that even and saying I'm going to get mad at you because you liked it.
Right.
Like, you liked it, and so now somehow you're on the opposite side too. Or,
Mhm.
to get back to where this started, I'm going to attack the authors. I'm going to
Yep.
attack, the actors and the actresses, or the studio directors personally because I didn't like the thing.
Mhm.
Like
Exactly.
I don't understand that either. Like, if you are an author like Chuck Wendig, and
Mhm.
you really love, so let's assume that Chuck Wendig is the biggest Legends Expanded Universe fan that there was. Maybe he is. I don't
Right.
know him. But so if that's you, and Lucasfilm and Lucas Books and Disney Books comes up to you and say, "Hey, you want to write a Star Wars book?" Are you really going to say, no thanks, I like Legends too much to come
Right.
in and
Right to come in
write
and
this
write. No.
book? Like, please, no, I don't want your money to take a part in this universe that I love so much. But I feel like that's the mindset. Is it's not
Yeah.
just about I don't enjoy this thing, but it's
Mhm.
about I need to get revenge on somebody because I didn't enjoy this thing, or I need to take out the fact that I didn't enjoy this on someone that I can blame for it.
Well, and that's what used to happen to Dave Filoni, and I think
Yeah.
people don't remember back when the Clone Wars was coming out. The Clone Wars was changing Legends, which wasn't called Legends at the time, it was called C canon,
Right.
and the Clone Wars was T canon because the movies were
Right.
G canon. I don't even want to get into the levels of canon that we no longer have to deal with because thank God. Um, but the Clone Wars was changing canon, and people were pissed about it. And what they didn't like, George Lucas was the executive producer on the TV show. Most of the stuff that changed because of George Lucas.
Right.
And all Filoni did was not say, George, you can't write Star Wars that way. And Filoni is a massive fan of the expanding universe and does know all of this stuff. And he was like, yeah, but these are George's stories to tell. And now people like want to put Filoni in charge instead of Kathleen Kennedy.
Right.
I do see there's two comments, one by Fat Batman and one by Rebecca, I want to get to, but it's going to kind of change the topic. So I don't know if you have anything else you want to say on this specific point.
I mean, I was really just gonna say that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I am done with it because I just don't understand. Like, I feel like not this type of conversation, but this particular tone that some people bring to the conversation prevents us from having real and interesting conversations. Like, I miss the days where our conversations about Star Wars were about the nature of the Force
Right.
rather than,
Yeah.
is Rose a worthwhile character?
Yeah.
I miss those days about Star Wars. I've been on, I joined the original StarWars.com boards, those forums, right before Attack of the Clones came out. And so I've been having some of these conversations for 15 years now. And I miss those conversations. I miss those type, and I thought we were getting into that before The Last Jedi. We were having these speculative conversations about Rey and about the Force and about the Jedi, and the Knights of Ren and all this. And
the Prime Jedi from The Last Jedi and all this stuff.
And it's taken such a left turn from there. And I guess part of this whole thing is just me lamenting that. But I want to get to these questions too if you want to read the ones that spoke to you.
So this is from a little ways back, but I gotta find it. Oh yeah, so the Fat Batman said the insanely loud vocal minority of the Star Wars community makes me question if it's worthwhile being a Star Wars fan, which sucks. I hate that like 3 people can make me question what I love so much. I had a similar reaction when the Kelly Marie Tran thing happened, where I'm like, I'm worried about calling myself a Star Wars fan if this is what it is to be a Star Wars fan.
Right.
I was having a conversation, and a friend of the channel, great Canadian guy, his streams are fun because we often get into super deep stuff like this, and he made a great point of it's important to not feel that way, because if the sane, like, not going to attack people fans quote unquote leave the fandom,
right, then
the fandom is just the toxic people. And he said that we shouldn't let them have it. And I totally understand the kind of defeatist, like, it just really sucks that there's fans that are like that, and it's so much easier to walk away from them.
Right.
But we really shouldn't let them have the fandom, and that's why I don't like making videos about them,
Right.
and it's why I'd rather make videos discussing the Force than discussing this. And I think it ties into something Rebecca said, which is, where is it? She's not a huge fan of the sequel films, but she certainly doesn't feel like she deserves anything else, which is the main problem. And it is a sense of entitlement. It's like, I've been reading the Star Wars books for all this time, and because I've paid for the books, I am owed movies, which is not true.
Right.
Like, you're owed the book you paid for, and that's it.
Right. I mean, and I think there is something to the idea of being bought into a fandom. I mean, maybe literally. I mean, before we got started, I was literally sitting here reading my copy of Most Wanted.
Yeah, which I'm going to start. Mine's right here.
Which on a completely different note, I hate dust jackets, and I was really excited that there was art on the cover underneath the dust jacket.
Oh, there is. That's awesome, because I also hate dust jackets. That's
the best thing ever.
That's phenomenal. Holy crap.
But so that's a completely
I'll
different
probably be
type of
starting
thing.
this after the stream.
But so, like, I've literally bought into this. You know, you can see the books behind me. I've literally paid money, bought into in literal ways this type of thing. And so I like feeling like I'm a part of it because of that. I like feeling like I'm a part of a community because I enjoy this thing and other people enjoy this thing. And I've spent time and money and effort thinking and talking about it, you know, and that takes different forms for different people. Maybe it's reading books, maybe it's writing books or fan fiction, maybe it's playing video games, you know, maybe it's making, you know, fan films or something, you know, that speak to us all in a different way. But what gets me is this idea that you must do it one way in order to do it correctly. Or that some people have bought into it more than others, and so like it's like I've been in those conversations before where people want to talk about Star Wars and they want to assert that they know more about Star Wars than I do when they obviously don't. Like that. That's one thing, but for me to say that I am somehow a fan and they're not.
Right.
Like that's something that even if I've done it in the past, I was wrong for having done it in the past.
Right.
You know, I don't have an entitlement. I don't own Star Wars.
Right.
You know, I have an ownership in the fandom and the community, but I don't own what Star Wars is, and I don't own who gets to participate in that.
Well, and I think, you know, we were kind of discussing this at the beginning of just, you know, what does it take to be a fan? I think the way I put it is I don't believe in gatekeeping. I don't believe in keeping somebody out from being a Star Wars fan. I do think there are types of Star Wars fans, and there's levels of Star Wars fans. Yeah. And there's a part of me, and it's not necessarily a good part, and it's an immature part of me. But there's an immature part of me that gets a little huffy when somebody wants to question how much of a fan I am. But they've only seen the movies, and I'm like, yeah, but I've put in all the time to read all these books.
Right.
Like, don't tell me what I know or what I don't know. But again, it's not to say like you can't be a fan if you've seen the movies. It's just there's different levels of intensity.
Right.
And then even then, there are people who would be as intense as I am. They just can't afford to do the things that I do, and that's not their fault, right? Like, I'm trying really hard to go to Star Wars Celebration, but you're still you can be a super fan and not go to Star Wars Celebration. I've been a super fan and I've never gone to a celebration before.
Right.
Like, I was not less of a super fan because I didn't go.
Right.
I just couldn't go to California for a week. You know what I mean? Where Celebration's significantly closer to me, and that's the only reason I'm going. And that was just luck of where it is. So there is levels, but then there's also, it's important never to leave anybody out, because sometimes it's just they don't have the same opportunity to own like, I don't have one of these super expensive replica lightsabers. That doesn't mean I love Jedi any less. I just don't want to spend $200 on a thing that's just going to sit on a shelf. I'd rather spend $200 on stuff I can read.
Yeah. I mean, and so I've felt something similar for other fandoms too. Like, I remember by the time Fellowship of the Ring, the first Lord of the Rings movie, came out in theaters,
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, not being hyperbolic, 10 times by then,
Mm-hmm.
because I used to read it every year since like elementary school, and so I am incredibly familiar with those books. And
Right.
I mean, I got annoyed for a while because I felt like people were enjoying this thing that like they didn't have a right to enjoy in the way they were. But I
Mm-hmm.
think ultimately what it came down to is I realized we were just fans of overlapping material. Like it
Yeah.
was just different. Like my love for that book series is different than someone's love for the film series. They're
Right.
similar, but they're ultimately different things. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the books and I love them for the reasons that I love them. I mean I love the movies too, don't get me wrong, but if you just love the movies, that's cool too. And so
Yeah.
it's not about legitimacy, it's about this is a different thing. And so I think there has to be room in fandom to express this differences. And
Right.
that's what I love about things like Star Wars Celebration. You know, I've never been to one either, but if you want to go to the panels, you can go to the panels. If you want to go, you know, meet these authors and get autographs, you can do that. If you want to, you know, get pictures with actors, you can do that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you're just into collecting, you know, I know some people that go to Celebration just for the exclusive collectibles that
Yep.
they can get. You know, whatever it is, like you can do that. Like
Mm-hmm.
that type of gatekeeping upsets me. That people would
Yes.
say that you have to do this type of stuff. But I feel like that's completely different than us trying to say I don't want this toxic nature to dominate my fandom. And I feel
Right.
like some people are conflate the two. You know, because they say, oh, because Ryan Johnson made a joke about Snoke on Twitter,
Twitter.
somehow
Yeah.
now I am personally offended because he's disrespecting fans or something like that. Like
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. But
Yeah. I mean, similarly to what you're saying about Lord of the Rings, I'm a huge MCU fan.
right.
Um, the only Marvel comic I have ever read in my entire life has been Star Wars Marvel. I've never read a superhero Marvel comic. It is not from disinterest. I would love to. I'm just obsessed with too many other things.
Right.
I don't I just don't have the space for another thing.
Right.
Especially one is so expansive as Marvel. So I just, usually when I talk to somebody, I usually say I'm an MCU fan over than saying I'm a Marvel fan, out of respect for Marvel. Like, I don't want to be like, yeah, I'm a Marvel fan. Who's Squirrel Girl? Like, I don't want to be one of those.
You are.
But I 100% am like that type of Marvel fan.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I don't want to feel like I can't be a fan of Captain America just because I haven't read his comics. I've gone to his movies at the first show. Like, it's the venue in which I can enjoy this character. And I'm sorry, if it's not the same way other people do. But the point of taking a story to a different medium is you get people who wouldn't have been interested in it otherwise. So that, should I be upset that, with Star Wars, with Solo, actually, Nolan, who's in the chat, he and I were having a conversation. I don't want to spoil Solo, but that cameo at the end, I probably can at this point, but that cameo at the end of Solo meant a lot to Nolan, and then he didn't even know the whole backstory behind it, and then I got to tell him about it, and now I'm trying to talk him into watching Star Wars, The Clone Wars. And, like, it's cool that Nolan had that response.
Right.
But it's not lessened because he hadn't watched the show. Like, he's still entitled to be super excited about what happened.
Right.
Just because I watched the show doesn't make it any different. But now he gets to have that, and then hopefully I can talk him into watching Clone Wars.
Well, and I feel like too, and maybe this is particular to franchises that are like multimedia, like in a genuine sense. But I feel like there are people, and again, this is different than personal taste, but there are people that only want the thing they enjoy to exist in a particular form.
Mm-hmm.
And so that bleeds over onto fans of the other things too, because like I know people. I'm big into Batman, and I know people who love Batman comics and who hate Batman movies, like even the Nolan movies. And like,
Mhm.
and I feel like there are Star Wars fans like that way too. That, oh, I'm only a film fan, and so therefore, if this comes from the comics or the books or the TV shows, this is
Mhm.
somehow inappropriate in my Star Wars.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and then the step beyond that oftentimes is because you enjoy this thing that I think is inappropriate in my Star Wars, you are somehow incorrect as well. Um,
Mhm.
but I don't know.
Yeah. It's there's just different levels and different mentality, and it's I feel like in a lot of ways the reason why this has happened to Star Wars, and maybe this is trippy and maybe this is just me making something more complicated than it needs to be, but a lot of countries are in some political growing pains, shall we put it. The US is no exception, but is also not the only country going through that right now. And I kind of got to wonder if Star Wars isn't so ingrained, at least it's super ingrained in US culture, and I think in a lot of European culture, but at the very least, it's ingrained in the culture of anybody who's a fan of it. I almost kind of wonder if we've hit this point where like we can't talk about what's really going on in the world anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and we feel so shut down about what we are or aren't allowed to say about the real world that we're kind of taking it out on Star Wars,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't feel like I can talk about my political opinions, so I'm going to tell you my opinion of The Last Jedi. And
Right.
I don't know, maybe I'm reading it, but it feels like Star Wars kind of took this turn around the same time the world kind of started taking this political turn.
Sure.
And I almost wonder if it's just not easier to talk about something because it is just a movie.
I mean, maybe so, and that's what I kind of meant earlier when I said I feel like this has changed in the last year or two, because I feel like there are so many people, and maybe rightfully so. I'm not necessarily being critical of this, but so many
Mm-hmm.
people that just have a deep-seated frustration, and maybe that frustration is about politics or society. Maybe they don't even know what it's about, and so it just takes whatever form is on their mind at the time. I don't think that's necessarily a bad or incorrect impulse.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that the dark side's not necessarily bad.
Right.
But so just because you're upset doesn't mean you shouldn't be upset. But I think there's something to that also there,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm just generally upset, or I'm upset about one thing, and it feels more okay to complain about this.
Yep.
Um, but I don't know. Anybody else in the chat have thoughts? Yeah, Fat Batman. I never would have assumed that you were a fan of Batman. I don't know why that would have come up.
No, I would assume you're not one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really what it is. Like, as a channel, at least for me, my goal is to always make Star Wars feel accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to explain stuff in Star Wars in a way that makes it make more sense, but also in a way that kind of encourages you to go figure it out for yourself,
Right.
and instead of having me just tell it all to you.
Right.
And not because I feel like yeah, should, darn it, but because it's so fun. It's so fun to watch the shows and it's so fun to read the books. I'm trying to like inspire that sense of fun in other people.
Sure.
And make it feel like it's not daunting. Like if you've only seen a couple of the movies, but you like comics a lot and you just want to try Star Wars comics, like I want to make it feel like a thing you can do.
Right.
And it's okay if you don't like something or you do like something or what have you, and we can have a discussion about it. But I've said several times here I don't like gatekeeping, but I tweeted out from my Yoda Bauer account the whatever day the whole thing with Kelly happened. I was like, my one gatekeeping statement is if you're gonna harass a woman online for a character that she played in a Star Wars movie, you are not a Star Wars fan. And I kind of stand by that. I'm like, you know what? It's okay to not like Rose. It's okay to even not like Kelly Marie Tran. I don't know how that's possible, but it's okay to not even like her.
Right.
It's not okay to harass anyone on the internet for any reason,
Right.
even if they are a person harassing someone on the internet.
Right.
Harassing them back still makes you a harasser. just because they deserved it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't like that kind of behavior. And that's really the thing is for me. Is like I used to have my one rule is to be a Star Wars fan, you have to like something that's Star Wars. But now I kind of feel like I have two rules, which is you have to like Star Wars and you just generally have to respect people.
Right.
And for me to include you in the club. Like, right. I don't want you in the club if you're going to be a jerk, I guess.
You can be in the club, you just can't show up to the meetings.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, like, I'm not going to... You can be in the club, I'm just going to mute you on Twitter. Yeah. And you will in no way ever represent the club.
I mean, and I feel like, too, this speaks to the tone that we want to have, at least on our Twitter feed and on our YouTube videos. You know, our forums, people express their own personal beliefs, and that's fine. But you and I have had this conversation, too. We don't necessarily want to be a shill for Star Wars.
Right.
Where we are completely uncritical, you know, especially if there are stuff to be critical about. That's why I've not talked about the Join the Resistance books, because I have a hard time with the Join Resistance books, and we can talk about that more on a separate thing. But we want to be honest but positive. Like, I would rather tell you this is not perfect, but these are the things I liked about it. Yep. And I feel like yeah, go ahead.
I've done reviews that had stuff in it I didn't like, and I just didn't dwell on it. Or I'm like, well, I didn't like this, but I think it's a style thing.
Right.
And if you like the style, that's fine. But this is it.
I mean, there's things too that we passed off to one another. You know, there was a comic not that long ago, and I didn't hate it. It didn't speak to me, and so I told you, I said, if you want to do this, you do this, because I didn't enjoy it as much.
And as it happened, I really did enjoy it. Yeah. So it worked.
And I just think that type of attitude, combined with just assuming the best about people and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and just generally, I mean, I don't want to be too sappy about this, but just be decent to one another. Like, I don't feel like that's such a hard thing to say.
Right.
But
it's just because Star Wars is a movie and maybe it feels like not as big of a stakes thing to attack someone on.
Right.
Doesn't mean that person isn't going to feel that attack any less. Especially if you still make that attack sexist or racist or whatever. They're still going to feel it, even if it's about Rose and not you in general.
Right. Do you have any other thoughts or anything you wanted to talk about today? Or
no, I mean, I'm kind of jumping off. Fat Batman just said what's great about Star Wars is how accessible it is, because there is someone for everyone, and I've always felt that way. And that's the thing, like, even if the movies aren't really your thing, a lot of people assume, like, oh, I didn't like the movies, maybe I wouldn't like the books, but that's not true. Maybe you would like the books, because a lot of times the books aren't like the movies.
Yeah.
And there's you might be surprised by what's out there for you. And I think Star Wars is so expansive. I really do want it to be for everyone. And it's okay if all of Star Wars isn't for me, right?
Sure.
Like, I love the Clone Wars. There's episodes of the Clone Wars I don't like, but they're not for me. You know? Even if they are really terrible, they're still not for me, and it's fine if you like them. There's so much Star Wars, it doesn't all have to be for me. There's been novels I read that I liked. It's okay if they're not like, you enjoyed Last Shot significantly more than I did. I didn't hate Last Shot by any stretch, but it spoke to you a lot more than me, and that's okay.
Right.
That's fine.
Well, and I remember, so maybe that's a good example too, because I remember how disappointed I was that you weren't as excited about Last Shot as I was.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think either one of us was wrong in that, but we can like different things. Like, I enjoyed the Karen Travis novels more than I think the vast majority of people who read them did.
And I can't. I own one Karen Travis novel because I told myself that I would, try to own all the Star Wars novels.
Yeah.
It's Hard Contact, which is the one I read that I hated the least. It is on my shelf, but it is upside down in protest to how much I did not like her book.
But yeah, so I like that general point too there, Fat Batman, that there's something for everyone, but not everything has to be for everyone, if that makes sense.
Yep. And Nolan, I'm glad you're enjoying Catalyst, because I really enjoyed Catalyst.
Catalyst is such a good book. If you like Rogue One and you haven't read Catalyst, like, stop whatever you're doing right now, because...
And go read Catalyst. I read Catalyst before I saw Rogue One, and it significantly increased my enjoyment of the film.
If you like Catalyst too, I would recommend Rebel Rising.
Yep.
Also, it's another book that kind of goes along with that.
Yep. But that's what I got.
Me too.
And we're at about an hour, so I super appreciate everyone coming out. We had a pretty good chat going. I really appreciate.
Yeah.
So it's always nice knowing someone out there cares a little bit.
And if you're watching this after the fact, again, this is a conversation I feel like our community needs to have right now. So if you have more thoughts or things, be sure to leave them in the comments on the video. You can always find us on Twitter and Facebook. You can come talk about this type of stuff with us on our forums. Forums are a good format for this type of stuff. But we want this to be an ongoing conversation. We haven't really known how to get into this conversation so far, but I think this is important. And so in addition to just wanting you to follow us on all the things, because you should follow us on all the things anyway, I think specifically because this conversation is important. Make sure you follow up with us if you're not watching us live, or even if you are. But I think that is going to do it for us today. And we will be back. I don't know what we're going to stream about next week, but we'll be back.
We'll come back. Yeah, right now it looks like a normal week of Tuesday KOTOR, Thursday StreamCast. But again, if that ever changes, we post about it on Twitter. So if you want to stay up to date on that, follow us on Twitter. The thing's on the below me.
And if you have ideas of stuff you'd like for us to cover, either in our shorter videos, or if you want us to do sort of a long form discussion of it on a streamcast, we're happy to try to address whatever you want. And if you want the technical readout of a land speeder, maybe there are some other resources that are better for you than our videos. But
theory and discussion and review is really our big thing.
But if there's something specific, we're going into now this kind of long period of a year and a half between Star Wars films now. So if you got an idea, send it to us, because we'll talk about whatever. I mean, but I think that's gonna do it for us today. So keep it real, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye.